Hello everyone, welcome to Module 5 of English 111. Let me share my screen with you because this is going to be a very important assignment in this course. It's worth a lot of points. It's complex. All right, there we go. Okay, in Module 5, the introduction points out that you're going to compose a draft of your analysis of the rhetorical context essay. So you're writing your first essay in this course. And then you'll submit this draft to receive feedback. I'm going to focus more on how you're actually going to write the essay than about the feedback. If you click on discussion 5-1, it says that textual analysis means that you should explore the speaker's or writer's goals, the techniques or tools used, examples of those techniques, and the effectiveness of those techniques. So you're going to be writing this rhetorical analysis. Remember, rhetoric is the art of persuasion. You're going to analyze how someone is going about trying to persuade their audience. So you're going to have to look at their techniques. You're going to have to analyze their goals, and you're going to have to judge the effectiveness of those techniques. You're going to have to determine whether that speaker has been effective at convincing or persuading their audience. It says, when writing a rhetorical analysis, you are not saying whether or not you agree with the argument. Really, your emphasis is not on the on the content. Your emphasis is on how this person goes about trying to persuade people. So you're discussing how the rhetorician makes that argument and whether or not the approach used is successful. Now, I put in bold here that I've included an outline and some tips about writing a thesis statement and the topic sentences for the body paragraphs in the resources section. You need to make sure you check those out. I'm going to show them to you in just a moment and walk you through them. It says to revisit the speeches you looked at earlier and draft a full analysis of the rhetorical efficacy. Efficacy meaning effectiveness. Was the speech effective at achieving its rhetorical purpose? Does it effectively target the target audience? Does it effectively persuade that target audience? And here's that selection of speeches. Now, you have the freedom, if you wish, to choose a different speech than the one that you worked with earlier. But I recommend that you don't. I recommend you stick with the one that you worked with earlier, simply because you've already taken the time to listen to it, you've already written about it, and some of the stuff that you've written about before will be included in this. And starting over from scratch with something new can just add another layer of a new obstacle for you, another layer of complexity to your already complicated life. And so make things easier for yourself, I recommend, and stick with the one that you've already worked with. The successful analysis is going to include the following key elements. It will include a specific thesis statement that makes a quality judgment on whether or not the chosen speech is effective at achieving its purpose. I will teach you how to write a thesis statement in a moment. A discussion of intended audience, like who is the intended audience? How do you know? What sentences or phrases lead you to this conclusion? You've already done that part, basically, in the previous assignment. You're recapping it for me here. A discussion of the speaker's credibility, that is, the ethos, okay? How does the speaker indicate experience or expertise on the subject at hand? You've got to address how the speaker convinces their audience that they are a credible source, that they are an authority figure on this topic. And a discussion of strategies used in the speech meant to strengthen the speaker's message. In other words, pathos and logos. Do they appeal to the audience's emotions? How? What are some specific examples? And do they appeal to the audience's sense of logic? How? And what are some specific examples? You're going to need to make sure that you also have in-text citations to support your claims and a works cited page in MLA style for your chosen speech. Okay, your final essay needs to be at least 700 to 750 words in length. The way that they phrase this is kind of awkward. If it's at least 700 words, you're fine. You can always write more, just don't write less. Okay, so if yours is 800 words or 751 words, That's fine because it's more than 700. Just don't write less than 700. I'm fine with you writing more as long as you aren't just rambling about stuff for no reason. Okay. So then there's some criteria there about providing feedback, but let's actually look at how you're going to go about writing the paper. So here's the outline that you can use. I've got it pulled up here. Let me zoom in on this slightly. Actually, there we go. Where do you start when you start writing a paper? Most people start at the beginning. They try and write the very first word and start from the first word of the introduction and then write it all the way through to the end of the conclusion. This is probably a mistake. You shouldn't take this approach. You should instead focus on the part of the paper that is going to direct the rest of the paper, or rather, you should focus on the sentence or the statement that is going to lay out the guidelines for how the rest of your paper will be structured. That's where you want to start. So you want to start here with a thesis statement. Your thesis statement is going to be one sentence that contains your argument and previews 3 general points you will make to prove that argument. Okay? So you want to write the thesis first, and then from your thesis statement, you'll see that the body paragraphs, each one of them is about one of the 3 points from your thesis statement. Okay, so if I have my argument is Scheer's speech is effective at persuading his audience. Boom, there's my argument. But I want to give the 3 reasons why. The first reason that I list in my thesis statement is going to be developed more fully in this paragraph. And the second reason I give will be developed more fully in this paragraph. And the third reason I give will be developed in this body paragraph. Okay, so we're going to have an introduction with some sentences that will lead to this thesis statement. And then each of the 3 points in the thesis statement get developed in their own body paragraph. Before I go into detail on the rest of this outline, let's talk about that thesis statement in more detail. So you want to argue whether the speech is effective or ineffective at persuading the audience. So, and your paper needs to follow that format that's provided in the outline. So again, your thesis statement needs 2 things: a claim or argument about whether the speech is effective or not. I don't care which one you argue. I don't care if you say that the person's speech is effective or if it's ineffective, as long as you can support it with evidence from the speech. And the second point is the preview of the 3 points you're going to develop in your paper. So here's an example of a thesis statement. This one, I just chose Scheer just as one example. Of course, you would put in the last name of the person that actually gave the speech that you reviewed, whether it's Scheer or someone else. Okay, so Scheer's speech effectively achieves its purpose. Boom. Part 1 of my thesis is now done. I have written a claim about whether the speech is effective or ineffective. I'm arguing it's effective. And then I'm going to preview the 3 reasons why. Because of how well he targets his audience, establishes his credibility, and uses pathos and logos to persuade the audience. So here's point 1, targeting the audience. That's going to be developed in this paragraph. Point 2 is how he establishes his credibility. That'll be developed in this paragraph. And then point 3 is how he uses pathos and logos to persuade the audience, and that'll be developed in the 3rd body paragraph. Okay, so each point from the thesis gets developed in their own paragraph. Now you might go, okay, well, how did you come up with these 3 points? Folks, reading the details of an assignment is crucial to your success at completing that assignment. The assignment tells you what 3 things you've got to include in your paper. Check it out. What does it say I need? A thesis statement, which we're talking about, but I have to discuss the intended audience. That was my first point. I say that if he achieves this purpose because of how he targets his audience. It says a discussion of the speaker's credibility. How he establishes his credibility is my second point. And it finally says the strategies he uses or they use to strengthen their message, like appealing to emotions or to the sense of logic, appealing to their sense of logic. Sorry, tongue-tied today. And there it is, how he uses pathos and logos to persuade the audience. So the assignment description tells you what 3 things you have to have in your paper. Now, and so I've got them listed here. Now, I could have said, sheer speech is ineffective at achieving its purpose. There I'm making a claim, right? I'm just changing whether it's effective or not, but I'm going to keep the 3 points because those are the 3 points I have to discuss in the paper. So I strongly urge you to copy one of the sample thesis statements from above, because it clearly discusses the 3 things that you need in your paper, and it makes a claim about whether it's effective or ineffective. The only thing you might have to change really is the author's name. Okay, so you can copy one of those sample thesis statements from above and do it word for word if you wish. You just got to keep in mind that you have to discuss the target audience, the credibility of the speaker, and their use of pathos and logos. Of course, if you use a speech by someone other than Scheer, you should insert the correct name, whether it was the speech by Ferreira or Jacobs or whomever. And make sure that you are going to argue whether the speech is effective at persuading the audience or if it's ineffective. You have to choose one side and stick with it. Sometimes students want to start off and say things like, well, it's effective in this way, and then in another paragraph talk about how it's ineffective. No. Okay, first of all, that sort of essay is far more complicated to write than we're ready to do at this point. We're going to try and keep it streamlined and simple. So just stick with whether it's effective or not. I know that you're smart, and I know that you're capable of seeing how it's effective in some ways and ineffective in others. I want you to ignore the opposite side at this point. Just argue for one side. Again, each of the 3 points from the thesis statement will be developed fully in a body paragraph. You then, after you've written your thesis statement, you should start by writing the topic sentence for each paragraph. So the topic sentence is going to contain the claim or argument from the thesis and the first, second, or third point from the thesis statements. So here's an example. My topic sentence for my first body paragraph is going to be, Scheer's speech is effective at achieving his purpose because of how well he targets his audience. It comes straight from this thesis. It stops right here at point 1. Why? Because I'm developing point 1 into its own paragraph. And then I'll follow it with other stuff. We'll get to that soon. Topic sentence 2 is going to be, Scheer's speech is effective at achieving his purpose because of how well he established his credibility. That'll be the first sentence of my second body paragraph. And then I'll follow it with some other stuff. And then the third topic sentence is going to be, Scheer's speech is effective at achieving his purpose because of how he used pathos and logos to persuade the audience. Again, that comes from the third point from my thesis statement. So I'm going to pretend that I'm you, for example, and I'm going to copy this over, and let me go ahead and get a Word document up. Okay, and of course I'm going to make sure, because I'm supposed to know this already, that I have like, you know, my name. In this case, you're going to write your name, instructor's name. That's going to have the class name, the date. I'm going to center the title. I'm going to make sure that I insert a page number and put my last name in front of it. Oops, I want the one that's in the top. There we go. This is all going to be Times New Roman font size 12. Bada bing, bada boom. I'm going to make sure that all of my spacing in the document is double spacing. I'm going to come over here. Now, I'm going to start with my thesis statement. So this is kind of my rough draft, but you know, here's my thesis statement. Cool. Now I'm going to imagine that I'm starting my first body paragraph. I want to start with this, like I said, that topic sentence. So I'm going to take that first point like that. Now I'm going to come down and go, okay, well now I'm going to do the second point. Because of how he establishes his credibility. And then I'm going to do the last point because of how he uses pathos and logos to persuade the audience. Okay, so now I've written my thesis statement, and now I've written the first sentence of each of my 3 body paragraphs. What's the other stuff or the next step that I should take? In my outline, it says, after I have the main idea, the topic sentence, I want to use evidence. I want to analyze that evidence and have a linking statement. Notice it spells meal. That might help you remember how to structure your body paragraphs. So if I'm going to say in my first body paragraph that Scheer targets his audience and does so effectively, I want to give an example. One example of how Scheer targets his audience effectively occurs when Scheer stated, and then I'm going to quote whatever Scheer stated that I think proves that point. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and I end quote. So now I have a piece of evidence. I now must go into more depth to connect the evidence to that main idea. So this should take several sentences. This is really the bulk of your paragraph is going to be the analysis. This is where you explain and support your ideas. So I have to say something like, this quote demonstrates, and then I'm going to give whatever that demonstrates. Okay. So I'm going to have several sentences now analyzing how this piece of evidence helps prove this point. Now, you might choose to include a second piece of evidence, and it's totally cool for you to do that. Okay, I could say something like, another piece of evidence is, and then I'm going to quote whatever it says, and then I'm going to end that quote, and then I'm going to analyze that quote too with whatever it is I choose to say. And then my paragraph is going to end with this, the link. Now, there's 2 ways to see this L actually. You could see it as lead out, which means you're going to lead out of your paragraph. You're going to wrap up your paragraph. So it might just be a way of you kind of quickly summarize the big idea of that paragraph and then put a period at the end and you're like, I'm done with this paragraph. I'm ready to move on to the next one. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And it's totally fine if you choose that route. However, if you are open to the challenge, you might challenge yourself a bit by seeing this as a linking statement, meaning you're going to connect, whoopsie daisy, you're going to connect the idea in this paragraph to the next one. This is more difficult, but the idea is that you're going to hint at what's to come up in the next paragraph without spilling the beans. That is, without giving all the details. So I might say something like, Scheer also, Scheer also, Scheer also worked hard to establish his credibility to persuade his audience. And then notice that is a nice kind of tidy little lead into this paragraph about how he establishes his credibility. And I'll do the same formula or follow the same structure as I did before in the previous paragraph. I'm going to introduce some piece of evidence. I'm going to analyze that evidence, and then I'm going to lead out or link, okay, to the next paragraph. By the way, just a side thing, make sure that you are using the tab key to indent the first line of each body paragraph. You see how like the body paragraph, or the paragraph itself is totally to the left, except for the very first line. You might wonder how that's done. You click in front of the very first word in your paragraph and then hit the tab key once, and it indents it 1/2 inch for you. So your indentations are perfect. Okay, now that I've written my thesis and my first body paragraph and second, I then go through and use the meal plan to complete the third body paragraph. So I'm just going to pretend like I have completed this paragraph as well. And of course, they'll be longer than this because you have to write 700 words. Oh yeah, also make sure you don't have huge gaps between your paragraphs like this sort of nonsense. Get rid of that so it's nice and tight. Okay, now that I've done that, there we go, I can work on the other sections. I've done the hardest work now at this point. The hardest work is writing the thesis statement and the 3 body paragraphs. And then it becomes much easier now to actually, now that I know what my paper is about and the sort of stuff that I've said in my paper, it's much easier for me to go back and fill in the rest of the introduction. So my introduction, I want to start by introducing the title of the speech, the author's name, and the main idea of the speech. So I'm going to start my paper by saying something like, in the speech, what streaming means for the future of entertainment. I think that's the full title. You'll check the title. By, is it Edward Shear or Emmett Shear? I think it's Emmett. You'll need to check. By Emmett Shear, the speaker discusses, and then I'm going to summarize the main idea. Okay, whatever that's going to be. So I'm not going to give you all the information in advance. But notice what I've done. I've lead it in. I've announced that I am reviewing a speech, basically. I'm giving you the title of that speech and the author's name, and I'm going to summarize the main idea of the speech, what the speech was about. Now, I might do another summary sentence and maybe a third summary sentence if I really need to. Okay? And what that's doing, though, is that's setting the context. So the context is the situation, that is, what is this person talking about and why are they talking about it? But you can also get into this, why is the topic important? And so I want to address why the topic is important in my next sentence or two. And all of this then leads into that thesis statement, which we already wrote. So the thesis statement needs to be the last sentence of your introductory paragraph. And notice that's what I've done. I've written now my first sentence. I've got some summary sentences, and I've addressed why the topic's important. And then it leads into this very specific thesis statement. Now, when I get to my conclusion, it's going to be the reverse. With the conclusion, you start by stating your thesis statement again, but not necessarily word for word. You want to restate the thesis statement in new terms. Then you want to make sure that you tie your whole essay together by answering the question, so what, or why does this matter? Your conclusion should be more than just a summary or a restatement of all the stuff that you said before. That's one mistake students make. So I'm going to restate my thesis statement. And then I'm going to put in parentheses, just here's a note to you. Do not restate all the stuff you mentioned earlier. That's not the point. Do broaden the scope of your paper to discuss why it matters. So in these sentences here, you're going to restate your thesis statement, and then you're going to broaden the scope of the paper to discuss why it matters. Why should this matter to your reader? Why should it matter to you? Why should it matter to the rest of the world? These are the things that you need to address in your conclusion. Okay, the introduction starts very broadly about here's the speech that I read, and here's what it's about. And here, then in the thesis statement, it gets more focused. Here's the specific stuff I'm going to talk about. But your conclusion says, here's the specific stuff I talked about. Here's why it matters to you, to me, and to everyone. So you need to kind of sit back for a moment, think deeply, stare off into space if need be for a little bit. Don't let your mind wander too far. But stare off into space and go, how could this be relevant or important to anyone or to everyone? And you want to hit that big picture, right? This whole thing of broadening the scope is about the big picture. Make it about the big picture, okay? That's your goal. So this is essentially how you're going to write your paper. Don't forget that you do need to have a works cited page. So you're going to make sure the works cited page is on a page of its own. Do not put your works cited just at the bottom of like wherever you had written or finished your conclusion. You actually need a new page. You're going to center the title, works cited, right? And you're going to follow the formula that we used before. So you start with the author's last name, comma, the author's, or in this case, sorry, it's going to be a speaker, the speaker's last name, comma, speaker's first name. You're going to put the title of the speech inside quotation marks with a period inside the quotation marks. You got to get the punctuation right. Now, this is going to be the title of the container. Comes next. Your container is probably going to be either TED or TEDx, or it's going to be YouTube. The container is simply the platform that produced this or is hosting this information. You're going to give the year that it was put up or created, and then you're going to give the URL link. Now, you also need to make sure that you do a hanging indent. So for those of you who are in Word, I'm showing this in Word, so this will become clear how you do it. For those of you that use Google Docs, simply look up how to do a hanging indent in Google Docs, and it's very easy. And so to do it here, I'm going to, actually it's been a long time since I've done this in Word. I'm going to go to the paragraph tab. I'm going to go from special and change it from none to hanging. It automatically sets it at 1/2 inch. Bada bing, bada boom. My URL will go out like this and maybe even on to the next line. Okay? So your goal is to write the paper about your appropriate topic. Make sure that you have the thesis statement as I've structured or as I've shown you. Make sure it follows that structure. Make sure your paper follows that structure. And then that is your goal for this. Okay? Some of you might be watching a version of this course where you don't post this for people to review. Some of you are watching one where you post this for people to review. So make sure that you are paying close attention to some of the information about that, because this video is meant to kind of cover a couple variations here, variations on the theme. If you have any questions, send me an email. I wish you the very best of luck with this. And yeah, reach out to me if you need any help. Thanks.